Welcome to the Connected Conversation with Brett Hill, a well-known mindfulness and somatic coach and coach trainer, as he demonstrates the power of mindful communication to change your life, work, and the world. Disconnected is the new normal. People are feeling overdriven, overwhelmed, and disconnected from meaningful conversations. But it doesn't have to be that way. Step into a life that works for you. Flourish and give voice to your natural creativity and purpose as you learn how to connect deeply and authentically with yourself, others, and the world. The Connected Conversation with Brett Hill starts now.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the Connected Conversation. I'm Brett Hill. I'm a mindful somatic coach and founder of the Mindful Coach Association. My specialty is mindful communications, and I really want to talk about something that's really important today, and we're going to go a little deep. So if you're listening wherever you are, I want to invite you just to take a moment and take a breath, because the kind of stuff we're talking about today is listening, and listening goes right to the core of who we are. Because in order to listen well, in order to really hear, and it comes with that is listening. I strangely enough, I don't consider listening to be just your ears, but also listening with your eyes. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but I call it like whole body listening, or full spectrum listening is another way that I talk about it. In order to be available to really hear, see, feel what is actually happening in your moment, you have to have a fair amount of intentionality to do that. And so the very first thing I want to say about listening is if you're interested in improving your world, in making your life a better experience, and in having better relationships and improving your professional work, there is practically no better investment, if you want to use like a term like that, which has, kind of like put the energy in and get the payoff. A lot of things around mindfulness are in the work that I do are framed that way so that people will engage the value. But the payoff, so to speak, is so much greater than the investment. This is one of those deals where, it's like, imagine, you invest $100 and you get back $110, but you also are happy for the rest of your life. It's like, okay, so if I was to say, hey, this $100 investment is going to buy you happiness, you go, wait, what? I mean, if I say it'll get you $10, people will go, oh, well, sure. So it's kind of like that with working on mindfulness and communication skills. It's like the real benefit is not the thing that you can actually describe. It's so much larger than that, and it is priceless. So I want to talk today, ironically, about listening and how to really take that to a new level in your life. Now, as this is, mindfulness related, you can imagine, and it's true, that the very first step is to learn to have some capacity to be mindful in yourself. Now, I'm not talking about sitting down on the cushion and meditating for hours and hours. I'm talking about the capacity to be present with your in the moment experience on purpose and non-judgmentally, meaning you're simply going to be present with what is happening to you and accepting that whatever is happening is in fact happening. It's like, that's my reality. Whether it's unpleasant or not, it is in fact your reality. And so consequently, resisting that experience creates tension, anger, resentment, concern. And some of those things may be warranted, but it's not necessarily a great experience. And so would you rather have a different experience? I'm not talking about running away from what's true. I'm talking about embracing what's true. There's a whole other conversation about acceptance does not mean approval. but I want to stay focused on listening here. In order to really, truly listen, you have to be willing to effectively suspend whatever thread is going on in your own head. Frequently, when someone's talking, what happens is that in your own mind, there's a what I call a thread. That's a computer term, meaning a CPU cycle that's running. Your attention is running a program like, what's he going to say next? What am I going to say next? I sure hope I'm not coming across. Excuse me. How am I coming across? Are they going to like me? Do I seem clever? Am I funny enough? Do I have food on my face? What is it that is going on in your head? That voice, that worry, that concern about what you are going to do next or how they are perceiving you. Now, this is the title of this whole show is called The Connected Conversation. And if you think about it, if I'm in a conversation with somebody and in my head, I'm thinking about, I sure hope what I'm saying is clever enough or witty enough, or I'm being attractive enough, or whatever it is that is on your mind, then what you're connected to in that moment is not the other person, but to how you want to come across. And so that creates a disconnection. That creates a disconnection in the sense that you can't really truly be present for this other person, because what you're spending your attention on is yourself. You're focused on your own fears, your own desires, rather than listening to what this other person is talking about. And I want to go deeper than that, not just listening to what they're saying, but using all of your senses to perceive who they really are. Now, you might go, well, what do you mean perceive who they are? I could just see them for a moment. I only see a little bit of them. I don't see really who they are. And I want to make a statement about that, saying almost everything about a person is on display all the time. Now, that's quite a statement. It's like, wait, what do you mean? Because if you don't tell me about, the fact that you lived in, New Jersey, then how am I ever going to know that? And that's true. There are technical details about a person's life that you won't know by just looking. But the influence of that is present in them and communicating in verbal and nonverbal ways if you are there for it. And if you really look and listen, you can perceive these influences that have created a set of experiences for a person. Their whole life has contributed to the way that they are coming across right now. All their fears, all their concerns, their key issues are all with them all the time. They might not be face forward, but they're in there and they're in the body. Somatic is one of the works. Some of the work I do is called somatic work, and so it's like in your body, so you can see how someone carries themselves. Someone's hunched over and they don't look you in the eye. That speaks volumes about what is their experience like. Who is the person that walks around in the world that way? What's it feel like? I sometimes do a thing I call trying on a person. It's kind of like if I meet somebody and I get really curious about what's it like to be them. And I'll actually privately kind of take on a posture that's like how someone moves, particularly when it's someone unusual, when they have an unusual presentation of some body language that is like, oh, this is meaningful in some way, and I don't quite get it, and I want to get it. And so I'll try to do whatever it is that they're expressing, whatever they're showing up, to see how it responds in my body. And that doesn't mean it's the same, but oftentimes what happens is it kicks up a resonant field, a resonant experience that helps me understand a little bit about what it must be like to have that kind of a posture that you walk around in all the time. And so if you're hunched over and contracted and your neck is tight and pulled in and you walk around like that all the time, that's a certain experience of life that someone who's open in the chest and erect and tall or wide and is like entering a room with the full breadth and height of themselves. And that's when they walk in the room, there's like a ta-da. That's a very different personal experience that person is having, and they walk around in that a lot of the time. And I get interested in those inner experiences, and if you're just simply present for them, when you talk to that person, you become aware that this person has a point of view, this person has a history, this person has connections to the entire lifetime of experience. I want to read to you a quote from a famous psychologist called Carl Rogers. This is one of my favorite quotes. And so I'm going to ask you to just I'm going to slow things down a little bit and listen to this and see what happens in you when you hear this. There is another peculiar satisfaction in really hearing someone. It is like listening to the music of the spheres, because beyond the immediate message of the person, no matter what that might be, there is the universal, hidden in all of the personal communications which I really hear. There seems to be an orderly psychological law of aspects of the same order that we find in the universe as a whole. So there is both the satisfaction of hearing this person and also the satisfaction of feeling oneself in touch with what is universally true. So there is, I'm going to repeat that. So there is both the satisfaction of hearing this person and also the satisfaction of feeling oneself in touch with what is universally true. Wow. What if you could listen to people in that way, or someone could listen to you in that way, where you're bearing witness and being present for not only what someone is saying in a deep way, but you're also in touch with something so deep that it seems like a universal truth. Love, and what are universal truths? Love, peace, justice, beauty, balance, wholeness, emergence. Those are the universals, right? The things that don't change. Presence. And when you connect to those experiences, something really interesting happens to your nervous system. Have you ever gone out to a mountain range that was just so huge and so beautiful and well lit that everything in you just stopped? You just go, wow. Or you see a rainbow, or you see something profoundly impactful visually or in an auditory way. And when you hear those things and you see those things, and it touches you and you allow it to reach you, your nervous system will just go. And we'll stop right there and come back in a minute. Hello and welcome back to the Connected Conversation with Brett Hill. We were talking about listening in a deep way, listening so intently and so, how should I say, sensitively, that you're hearing what is not said. You're hearing, another way I talk about this is to say, behind the story. You're seeing deeply. And you're hearing and feeling, as I had just read this Carl Rogers quote, what is universally true as well as what is personally true. I love that so much because it speaks to the yin and yang of life, right? The universal in the personal. the transpersonal and the personal all at the same time. And isn't that literally, the kind of a situation that we're in? We're these individuated beings walking around on the planet in this timeless, but yet there's a sense of timelessness in the universe. And, I'm getting kind of out in woo-woo land here, but we're literally at the intersection of those things. And that's what makes our experience as human beings so magnificent, is that we have the capacity to be both in touch with the temporal and the timeless, the personal and the transpersonal. And that's why I'm not a fan of, I did for many, many years, I did a lot of meditation. I was a teacher of meditation techniques that were very involved and very profound in terms of their impact on me. Kind of a Kriya Yoga, a version of Kriya Yoga combined with, higher consciousness, and just simply blending, if you will, the physical form with these metaphysical higher chakras, if you want to think of that, energies. And I still have that in me, but I don't teach that or put my message out there with that framework these days, because I have found that the language of it doesn't really serve, I think, to help a lot of people who don't quite want to go there or appreciate that. And the mechanics of the process are the same no matter what. In other words, when you connect to these universals that I'm talking about, I can go to the mountains. I can look at a flower. I can see beauty, in very small things and very large things. Like I love the sky. I love the clouds. I look at the cloud, and I just let myself experience the beauty of this ephemeral form that's just nothing but a magnificent temporal creation of nature that is blowing over me and is completely unique and will never exist again. It's almost like those Buddhist sand paintings, the sand drawings, if you've ever seen those, where these monks spend days and days tapping tiny little amounts of sand into this incredibly detailed, magnificent mandala. And then when they're done with it, they just sweep it away. It's like, wait, what? That was a masterpiece, and you're just sweeping it away as a testament to, that beauty is ephemeral. So there's, the big beauty, which is always present. And then there's the individuated moments. And we can connect to those big moments through the individuated moment. We can connect to the big beauty through the small beauty. And when you do that, you are then taking responsibility and ownership for what are you connected to. And that's the whole point of the connected conversation. When I'm talking to somebody, what am I connected to? Am I connected to beauty, peace, love, truth, justice inside myself, inside the world, or in the world around me, in another person? Or am I connected to, well, I wonder what I'm going to say next. I hope they like me. And how does that change the conversation? What happens? What words come out of your mouth or don't, as the case may be, because of the way you're connected? So one of the ways you can deepen this kind of capacity, and one of the techniques you can use to kind of slow things down, is simply a technique I call managing the spotlight. I teach this in my course when I teach coaches, and also in just general mindful communications. In managing the spotlight, you're on purpose making choices about what you say and you don't say in a way where you let someone else have the focus of attention on purpose. Now, that's different than just being quiet because someone's over talking. I'm talking about a situation where you on purpose don't say something like, oh, yeah, that reminds me of the time whenever. So, you're walking on the street with somebody, a friend, and they're having some trouble and they're expressing some real grief or real sorrow. And they say something like, and it's, now that this is gone, I just don't know what I'm going to do. And there's a pause. And at that moment, you can say, yeah, it reminds me of the time when my grandmother had trouble and she left us. And, or you say some other associative thought, like, oh, they had a loss. And so you think, oh, I've had losses. And so now what's in your head, what you're connected to are your losses, your story. And if you speak about them, which I'm not saying that's wrong, I'm just saying there's an impact, there's a consequence for doing that. And the question is that the way you want the conversation to go? You can have some authority, some control, some conscious choices about how you want things to go. And one of those choices is to notice that you're thinking about your own loss and say, I'm just going to let them talk and be a loving presence for this other person. I'm just going to give space because they're not asking for a solution. They're not asking for me to make it better. They're not asking to hear my story even, although there can be value in that. And I'm not trying to say that this is a rule. Just saying you want to have the capacity to make a choice to let them have the spotlight. And it's a gift when you do this. It's not like a begrudging thing. Well, I let them take up all the space. That's not it. We're talking about willingly, graciously, compassionately letting someone else be the center of attention for a while. And it's particularly when it's someone who's not relishing on being this. You have those people who just like take the spotlight and won't let it go. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a situation where someone is, in this case, suffering, and you're just making space for them. You're holding space for them and giving them a tremendous gift, which is your presence, your caring, your sensitivity, your empathy. And you're hearing them and you're feeling, oh, yeah, this is hard. And so maybe you say, instead of, that reminds me of, you just say, wow, that's tough stuff. That's really difficult. And in saying something like that, you're naming that you are witnessing what they're experiencing, and you're just going to speak the words about what it is. It's very, very simple. You're naming their experience to them. And when you do that, you're demonstrating that you're paying attention and that you're caring. And what happens in the other person is that they'll go, yeah. They'll deepen and they'll connect to, and you'll create, this is a way that you can create rapport. Now you're in connection. Now you're facilitating the conversation towards connection, doing it on purpose. And that's not, this is sometimes people will say, well, aren't you just manipulating the situation? I say, well, yeah, you are, but you're doing it in the service of care, love, concern, compassion, togetherness, aliveness, humanity is in our commonality. It's like there's no better way to do that than to facilitate towards connection. Better that than being unconscious and just facilitating towards, what are you going to facilitate towards otherwise? Oh, it's better just to be unconscious and take it away and make it about me now. That's not necessarily the best choice there. It doesn't mean it's the wrong choice, but it's not even a choice if you aren't aware of making the choice. And that is the difference. You have to have a space inside you where you realize I can choose. As Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space, and this is mindfulness, right? And in that space is the power to choose. And that is freedom. Now you have real freedom. I have a whole other presentation I'll talk about where mindfulness is really about freedom. A lot of people think, well, you're not free because someone's telling you what to do. And it's true. There is a form of freedom that has to do with the mechanistic aspects of the world. But the deeper truth is that if you were a multi-billionaire and you haven't done your inner work, you're still you're profoundly enslaved to your habituations, to your unconscious mind, profoundly. And oftentimes people don't realize that. And so the very first thing that happens whenever you begin to do your work with mindfulness is that you begin to become aware of how many choices you don't make, meaning you're on automatic. You're just doing whatever urge comes to mind. And your whole nervous system is organized around presenting to you choices in quotes that are already made. They just look, the nervous system has already chosen for you. You just don't realize it. I mean, you feel like you have a choice about it, but you don't really. This is the latest breaking neuroscience around all this, and it's really fascinating. How you break that, how you interrupt that, I should say, intervene in that, is by having a moment where you realize the impulse and then you consciously you choose among choices. You say, well, I could do this. I could speak. I could put my arm around somebody. I could interject here. And you're making choices about what to say and do next. And you're doing so in a way that's helpful, in a way that serves relationship, serves connection, serves authenticity, and is in service to humanity. That's the beginnings of what I would call mastery, of really truly owning opportunity that we have to be helpful to each other, to support each other in ways that really matter. I mean, what do we need more in the world than people who are there for us? And we'll talk some more about this when we come back from the break. Welcome back to the Connected Conversation. I'm your host, Brett Hill. We've been talking about listening in a deep way. So I'm just going to invite you to take a moment, take a breath, whatever's going on in your world. And I know if you're listening to this, you're listening to the sound of my voice. I'm going to invite you to also look around you and notice what's going on. Where are you? Maybe you're driving, maybe you're running on the beach, maybe you're in the office, maybe you're at home. Whatever it is, and just notice, using your eyes to just notice. And then use the rest of your sensitivities, like, how does it feel to be in the clothes that you're in? How does it feel to be sitting, standing, laying, running? Are you wearing shoes? How do they feel on you? What's the rate of your breathing? What's the temperature of the air? Is it dry? Is it moist? Where are you breathing from in your body? Is it from your belly, your chest, the upper part, the middle? No judgment here, just simply noticing. Your eyes, your sensations around your skin, the effects of gravity on your body. People talk about common experience. Everybody lives in the field of gravity. We don't know who we are really without it. What's that like? To feel the weight of your form, of your body. Your vision, colors. And maybe you can hear some other sounds besides this. Bringing all these sensitivities into your moment. And I want you to consider, if you're experiencing a slightly heightened state of awareness, staying in what I would call center. Like, just think to yourself, I'm centered. Centered in your experience. Sometimes we'll have an experience that pulls us out. And if you do have something that's going on like that, just notice, oh yeah, that's pulling. I want to jump into that experience. And just notice and name, oh yeah, that's there. Letting yourself just be in your moment, in your sensitivities. And imagine now that you're talking with someone and you're in this centered, highly sensitive place, and you're watching them, and you're hearing them, and you're sensing them. What's their age? What's their apparent race? What's their apparent gender? How do they speak? What's the pacing of their words? What's the pitching of their words? Is it constantly like a monotone, or are they really animated? Are they really fascinated? Just, you never know what's going to say next. Or are they like, well, there's no energy in my voice. What's the impact of that intonation on you? What kinds of words do they use? Do they use a lot of body language? How animated is their face? How close or far do they speak to you? I mean, do they stand from you? Personal space is a big thing. All of these things have an impact on your perception of another person. In my coach training at the Mindful Coach Method, I help coaches be in this place when they're listening to clients so that we can use all of our senses to perceive what is going on with someone. Who are they? We're working at the level of identity, of being. Who is this person? Being, identity are two different things, but identity and then underneath that being. And from this place, you can engage your world, your presence, it's not, you can bring a lot more of this kind of more connected experience into your life than you might think. Yeah, we have details. We have to do our taxes. We have to drive to the store. We have to deal with sick parents or children. We have to deal with our own illness. We have to deal with our own household. We have to deal with our own careers and other people, both pleasant and unpleasant. All of those things will go better when you're in a more sensitive, grounded place. Now, some people may think, well, I'm already too sensitive. There are people who are overly sensitive. I'm one of them. I'm a very sensitive, kind of guy, and I have been my whole life, and it's kind of challenging to manage. So it's true. And in some ways, you need to notice that, and then you can take care of yourself. One of the things that happens is I'll go to a store, and some days I can really manage it, and some days I can't. I start to get really overwhelmed by rows and lights and 5,000 objects and 1,000 people, and it's just too much for my nervous system. And instead of just powering through, I'll take action to remove myself, if I can, from this situation and try to ground, connect, and respect and honor my sensitivities. One of the reasons that really sensitive people wind up being kind of victimized by their sensitivities is because we live in a very harsh world. We live in a world that doesn't respect our native sensitivities. Most people actually, I think, are very sensitive people. It's just that we run roughshod over our sensitivity so much that they just get numb. We just become numb. And for people who begin to wake up, you begin to realize, yeah, it's kind of a harsh world. And that's why it's so important to curate your experience. Curate your experience consciously. There's no law, rule that says you have to be present for every ugly thing on the planet. And if you chose to do that, you're going to burn out. You're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to have a bad day. You're going to have a bad life. And that doesn't mean you run away from it. It just means that there's more than you can bear. There's more than anyone can bear. And at the same time, there's unlimited amounts of beauty in the world. There's a tremendous amount of joy, a tremendous amount of life, of creativity, of beauty, unbelievable beauty, unbelievable. I had an experience like that today, actually. Unbelievable beauty. A friend of mine sent me a recording of a woman, a singer, Hey Jira, singing Joni Mitchell's Hey Jira. And I'm a Joni fan. And I want to read to you the lyrics of this because this was beautiful. And it may not strike you that way, but this was meaningful to me. And I wanted to, and I'm inviting you to use a sensitivity that I was talking about earlier and listen to this. So this is the lyrics to Hey Jira by Joni Mitchell. I'm traveling in some vehicle. I'm sitting in some cafe, a defector from the petty wars that shell shock love away. There's comfort in melancholy when there's no need to explain. It's just as natural as the weather in this moody sky today. In our possessive coupling, so much could not be expressed. So now I'm returning to myself, these things that you and I suppressed. I see something of myself in everyone, just as this moment of the world, as the snow gathers like bolts of lace waltzing on a ballroom girl. You know, it has never been easy whether you do or do not resign. Whether you travel the breadth of extremities or stick to some straighter line. Now there's a man sitting on a rock. They're either going to, now there's a man and a woman sitting on a rock. They're either going to thaw out or freeze. Listen, strains of Benny Goodman coming through the snow and the pinewood trees. I'm porous with travel fever, but you know I'm so glad to be on my own. But still, somehow the slightest touch of a stranger can set up a trembling in my bones. I know no one's going to show me everything. We all come and go unknown, each so deep and superficial, between the forceps and the stone. While I looked at the granite markers, those tribute to finality, to eternity, and then I looked at myself here, chicken scratching for my immortality. In the church, they light the candles and the wax rolls down like tears. There's the hope and the hopelessness I've witnessed 30 years. We're only particles of change, I know, orbiting around the sun. But how can I have that point of view when I'm always bound and tied to someone? White flags of winter chimneys in the mirrors of a modern bank. From a window of a hotel room. I'm traveling in some vehicle. I'm sitting in some cafe. A defector from petty wars. Until love sucks me back that way. Wow. We all come and go unknown, each so deep and superficial between the forceps and the stone. That's really strong. This is, in my mind, this is really a powerful lyric and a beautiful song. And I'm privileged to bear witness to it. We'll talk some more when we come back for the Connected Conversation. And we're talking about one of the most important, underrated, powerful skills that humanity has never embraced. And that is listening deeply, listening profoundly, listening beyond the story of other people, listening to who is speaking in a deep and powerful way. If I have any kind of a skill or gift, this might be it. And I'm not really even sure how it came to me in some ways, but it seemed to be something that I'm just inclined to. I'll tell you a story about how powerful this can be. I was in a workshop, and I was training in the Hakomi method of somatic psychotherapy. And in this workshop, there was a moment where, these are a bunch of pretty highly skilled people sitting around doing the work. We're sitting down with each other. And the assignment, this was from Ron Kurtz, who was the founder of the method. He had said, this is a strange exercise, but now, and I want to set the stage a little bit. And we had been doing this work for a couple of days, right? So there's all this, we're kind of steeped in this presence and this acute awareness of each other and our own mindful awareness, not only of ourselves, but of another person. So that's been going on for a while. And then he gives us this assignment where you're sitting in a group and one person is the actor, and that actor gets up, and I don't mean actor like a stage actor, but I mean they're taking an action. Their task was to simply, in silence, get up, walk across the room, pick up an object, any object, come back and sit down, set the object down, and then say, Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. And everywhere that Mary went, the lambs were sure to go. So in that context, in that setup, it's kind of like, well, what's that? It's kind of like, it's an irrational sort of thing. It's like, doesn't make sense. There's no point. Nothing got achieved. No work got done. It's just, and the assignment is for the people who are not the actors to simply be present with the experience of this person doing these things. So the person's not revealing any details about themselves. They're not saying, well, I grew up in XYZ and I was a single child. And, you don't know anything about them. And yet you're watching them do these things. And so being present with this is in a deep way, in a conscious way, was profoundly moving for me. Because I found that you can see very deeply. So, but you have to try. You have to not try I'm going to make myself see, but relax into the experience like I've been talking about today. So this big guy who was in our circle, he was like football player sized guy, yet he's this really heartfelt, well-spoken somatic therapist person. And he got up and he walked across the room because he was the actor, and he picked up an object and he came back and he sat down. And I noticed as he did this, he was exceptionally alert to his motions. It was almost like he had a very clear sense of where his arms and his legs and his hands were the whole time, unusually so. In other words, this guy had a lot of well-practiced precision in his movements. And I'm going, what is that? And then he sat down and he said, Mary had a little lamb, and he did the whole recitation, and you could hear the heart in his voice. You could just hear it. And you can do that sometimes if you listen for people, you can hear their heart in their words. And that's another thing I invite people to do. Connect your heart to your voice. Let your heart speak, right? Let your heart have an influence on the way you speak. Well, this guy was wired up that way. And so here I have this big, big guy walking across the room in a very precise way, doing this heartfelt recitation. And I'm trying to put all this on in myself, going like, what is going on here? And it hit me like a brick. It like not like literally like a whack, but it's like this insight, like, oh my God, here's this oversized guy in a world that isn't built for his size. And he's a big, strong man, right? And so it's like I'm going, wow, this guy knows what it's like to be the elephant in the room, right? He's like the imagine what is it like to be an actual elephant in a room, and a conscious one. Like, you don't want to knock things over. You don't want to hit things. You can hurt things just by touching them. You put your foot down and you crush somebody, somebody's foot or a small animal or something. Imagine the kind of awareness you have to have of where you are physically in order to simply not hurt somebody or break something. And I thought, and I didn't know this was so, but I'm going, this could be why he's moving with such precision and such awareness. And so I took a moment and I said, I don't know if this is so, but I have the feeling that you know what it's like to hurt things unintentionally simply because of your size. And this was when we were just reporting back on our experience. And he burst into tears and sobbed for a full minute. And it was such a moving experience for us all to see and feel for a moment into this man's everyday experience of being oversized for the world. And it was so powerful because all that it took was the willingness to look. And that stuck with me profoundly. I try to bring that kind of awareness to many of my everyday conversations, even when I'm in, the grocery store or checking out. I look and I say, who is this person? Here they, of all the things they could be doing in the world, they're standing in line. They're standing here as a cashier. Wow. What's going on for them? Who are they? What's in their world? And the moment you do that, a door opens that allows you to potentially connect. And even if you don't, viscerally or overtly connect at some soul level, you are creating the opportunity to connect in a way to see the universal. Remember the Carl Rogers quote from earlier. And it's deeply satisfying and deeply nourishing to walk through your world that way. And so I want to say this to you, listeners. If I could rip this skill out of my skin and give it to you, I would, because it matters. It makes a difference. It changes it changes the world around you. It elevates your experience and lifts everybody into a state where a better experience is possible. And it doesn't mean that every conversation you have is going to be, soul to soul. But it does mean that if it can happen, it has its best opportunity to. And that is all you can do, is create the best conditions for a better outcome. That's the most we can do. And that's having each other's back. That's supporting the elevation of consciousness in the world that you walk around in. And that's the one that matters, the people that you meet, the world that you're in, your relationships, your work. So you can tell I'm kind of passionate about this because I truly, truly believe that this can change the world. This is what people are longing for. It's not what you have, it's who you are and what you bring to your interactions. And that's what the Connected Conversation is all about. What are you connected to? when you're interacting with other people. And it all begins by simply paying attention to your experience and giving voice to what that is. And I like naming, I'm experiencing joy, peace, frustration, anger. No judgment about it. That's just what's true. And learning the lay of your own inner landscape is the only way you're ever going to be able to connect to someone else deeply is when you can connect to yourself deeply. And that is truly the heart of the Connected Conversation. So thank you. This is Brett Hill with The Connected Conversation. Check it out at theconnectedconversation.com. If you're a coach, check out themindfulcoachmethod.com or join the Mindful Coach community at mindfulcoachassociation.com. It's free, and we hope to see you there. Until next time, this is Brett Hill. Bye now.
Thank you for joining us today on The Connected Conversation with Brett Hill on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Tune in next time to experience the power of mindful communication to bring deeper meaning to your life, work, and the world. Brett is here to help you step into a life that works for you, to help you flourish and give voice to your natural creativity and purpose. See you here next time on The Connected Conversation to learn how to enjoy the experience of your moment-to-moment life. For more information, visit theconnectedconversation.com.